Today on 21st Century Business, explore state-of-the-art technology, innovative business strategies, insights from cutting-edge corporations around the globe, a visionary look into the answers of tomorrow today. Business leaders, business solutions, 21st Century Business.
Welcome to 21st Century Business. I'm Jackie Bales. Most companies today do a sufficient job of developing sound strategies, but typically don't implement these strategies well. In fact, most major transformational change projects fail to realize their full objectives. As a result, critical endeavors take longer, cost more, and deliver less. Well, here today to discuss the problems with strategy execution and how his company helps solve them, we have Chairman Daryl Conner from Conner Partners. Welcome, Daryl.
Hi, Jackie.
Daryl, tell us more about the challenges companies face when it comes to strategic execution or organizational change.
Jackie, most leaders of large organizations have a pretty good handle on what they need to change. They either can formulate that themselves or they can go outside and get consulting help to figure out what to do. The problem comes when you create those strategies. How do you execute them in a way to get the full value? Because every time you change, you promise somebody. Sometimes it's shareholders, sometimes it's the customers. You make a promise. Most of the time that full promise is not implemented. Then that's where we come in.
So tell us who Conner Partners is and really more on how you address these changes.
Well, we started the firm in 1974. First, we're very research focused, and so we were zeroing in early on. First, we were actually determining, are there patterns that distinguish companies that are succeeding or failing with change? In the 70s, no one really knew if there were patterns or not. We established that there were patterns, and so we've been documenting those patterns ever since. So basically what Conner Partners does is we provide access to these patterns of success and failure around change, and we advise the leaders on how to replicate success and avoid the failure patterns.
Wow. Well, for more, let's take a look at this 21st Century Business Field Report.
There's an old saying that goes, "The only thing that is certain in life is death and taxes." However, in business today, the equivalent axiom would read, "The only thing that is certain in business is change."
There are a handful of fundamental truths that every senior executive needs to be aware of as they launch into leading a major transformational change. At the top of that list is establish a clear and shared intent. Prepare yourself, your team, those that are going to support your team, and those that are going to be disrupted along the way, and begin to understand and put in process ways to identify, prioritize, and crush the risk that will likely get in the way of the transformation.
In the healthcare industry, everything is changing. We're going from a very safe, highly profitable, stable environment to one where everything is up for grabs. The consumer is changing, the structure of the industry is changing, the competitive landscape is changing, and all of this is messy, it's ambiguous, it's really complicated, and executives know that they have to change or they're going to get left behind.
Over 4 decades, Conner Partners has developed a comprehensive approach and a robust methodology that helps organizations realize their true business goals and succeed with transformational change.
So Daryl, there's a lot of talk about companies going through strategic change. What exactly is that?
A big part of what a leader does every day is figure out what are the gaps between what we need to be doing to succeed and what's actually taking place. Some of those gaps are small, and you can think of that as kind of continuous improvement, and then there's really large gaps. They don't happen as frequently, but they're more fundamental in nature. Strategic change is not only dealing with the large gaps, the fundamental changes, but it's dealing with changes where the organization is at risk if they don't get it right. So there's the future of the organization is in some degree at stake when you're dealing with strategic change. So you think about it's fundamental change, not incremental, and it's crucially important. That's strategic change.
Can you give me an example of what you mean by strategic change?
Well, as you heard in the field report, almost all industries are going through strategic change, but healthcare is it's such an easy one to think about because everything about that industry is changing. you've essentially got two players in that industry. You have payers and providers. So payers are your insurance companies. Providers are your physicians and hospitals. Because of the competitive pressure, government mandates, new technology, consumer expectation shift, each of those groups separately are having to completely reinvent their model. But it's more than that. Now they're coming together. So now you have insurance companies buying hospitals. So each of them are changing their paradigm, and the paradigm of how they relate to each other is shifting. So it's a classic case of there's no place to hide.
I guess not. So is there a challenge in figuring out what must be done to overcome that change and do it well?
Yes, and I don't want to minimize that. It's not easy to figure out what to do. Most organizations are doing a relatively good job of that. The problem comes when you feel like that you've either created or you went out and bought the right solution. You're a senior leader, you're sitting at the top of your organization and you're pushing what you think are the right strategic buttons, and the lights aren't coming on. Or you look down and they're only coming on when you're looking at them, or they're blinking, it's not sustained, or it took more money to get them to turn on. It's not what you thought when you push the strategic button. It's very frustrating for a leader to feel like he or she is on top of the right answer, and they look out and they can't see the reality of it. So it's the difference between having confidence that you know what to do and having confidence that you can execute what needs to happen. Mm-hmm. You know, competitive advantage doesn't get generated because you have a powerful strategy. It gets generated if you execute against the powerful strategy. And that a lot of leaders today are really frustrated because they've got the right answer and they're not getting the right execution.
Is it a lack of communication or a lack of ability to demonstrate in some way what the change needs to be?
It is that. That is certainly one of the issues, is how do you communicate it? But beyond communication, you have to enroll people in what does it really mean. I can hear, Jackie, you tell me that we're going to do something different and actually not get the essence of what you're talking about. I can go through the motions. So what happens is organizations install change. You've given me some new technology. You've given me a new policy. We've had a merger, whatever. I've got that in my hands, but I don't actually know what your purpose was. And so you've got to not only communicate what we're doing, you've got to communicate the intent behind it. And you've got to cascade that intent in a consistent way all the way down into the organization. And you've got to maintain the integrity of that intent over maybe a year or two of implementation. These are some of the pitfalls that organizations face.
Wow.
Utilizing a structured yet flexible approach, Connor Partners helps leaders and their teams understand how to manage transformational change within their organization.
To also accept that there are known patterns of success and failure in transforming businesses. We can understand those patterns and apply them so that we have prepared ourselves to not react to everything, but to be more predictive in our behavior and to get out ahead of what we know is coming and use those patterns to our benefit. And then finally, the reality that we have to own the sponsor chair, that we have to, as senior executives, we have to lead these changes ourselves, and that some kind of a loose delegation to people below us, regardless of how sincere we are in doing that, will not get it done. If the transformation is at the enterprise level, we have to lead it at the enterprise level. If the transformation is at a division level, we have to lead it at a division level. And there's no substitute for that. So understanding that resistance is a natural, normal part of the process, that the patterns of success are knowable and can be applied and leveraged to our benefit, and that there's no substitute for leading these things ourselves, are probably the top for me in terms of 3 truths that I would want people to remember.
Executives don't undertake a transformation because it's a good idea. They undertake a transformation because it's non-negotiable for their business. I worked with an executive team that was embarking on a transformational change for their company, and this was a business that had seen their revenues grow 300% in 5 years. They had 87% of the market. But looking forward, they saw a lot of competition coming in at lower cost, and they saw their market shrinking. And they knew if they didn't get in front of this, they were going to lose a significant part of their business. This leadership team had to change an organization that was highly profitable, stable, and really not used to changing. And when you have that kind of change going on, you have got to be highly committed. This leadership team wasn't undertaking this because they wanted to. It was hard, and there was no way that these leaders were going to be embarking on this level of disruption to their organization unless it was essential to their business.
So, talking about problems that are encountered with strategic change, how would a leader know if that's what his or her company's facing?
So strategic change, as we said earlier, has to do with big changes, and it has to do with critical changes. We measure how big the change is and how crucial it is in a couple of ways. First, is it transformational change or is it incremental change? Mm-hmm. And the best way to measure that is to find out to what degree this change is going to shift expectations. The psychology behind change is actually pretty easy. If you ask me to do something different than what I thought I was going to do, it's a change.
And people fear change, don't they?
Well, we do. The reason is we're actually calibrated toward, we want predictability. Well, predictability means what I expect to happen actually happens. What you've just introduced into my life is I didn't expect this to happen. And so to the degree that people have to adjust expectations, you're moving more toward transformational change. By the way, it doesn't matter whether people like what they're doing or not. They can love what you've asked them to do and hate what they're currently doing. They still have to make an adjustment. That's how fundamental this expectation issue is for us. So one thing that we measure to see if it's strategic change or not is it transformational? Another thing we measure is, are you trying to install the change or realize it? Strategic change means we're going to full realization. We're not just handing people technology. We're not just going to tell them about the merger. The third thing we measure is this a good idea or a business imperative? A good idea is when an executive says, well, we ought to do this, and let's put some money behind it, and I hope it works. A business imperative is you wake up at 3 in the morning going, how's it going? Right? A business imperative is when a leader says, on my watch, this is going to happen. Okay, there's an intensity about it. Strategic change is change that's transformational in nature. Nothing short of realization is acceptable, and it's an absolute business imperative. When organizations can put those together, they know that they're on top of strategic change.
What are some of the biggest mistakes you see executives make?
The more common ones is they announce transformational change. They put the rhetoric out there for that, but they actually only end up making incremental moves. They say it's a business imperative, but then they behave as if it's just something else we have to get done. They claim that we're going to fully realize, but then they back themselves into just installing. Another common mistake is they put way too much change too fast on people. And that produces future shock. Future shock is when people can't absorb any more change without displaying dysfunctional behavior. They'll keep changing, but productivity and quality starts dropping off, and the change you're introducing gets installed instead of realized. Those are symptoms that come when people are asked to do too much too fast. So these are some of the more common pitfalls that leaders fall into.
So what does Connor Partners bring to bear in situations like you just described? How do you help?
Well, we have a huge advantage in that we've got 40 years of documenting these patterns of success and failure. And what does it take to actually realize the change that the leaders are about to introduce? So we're brutally frank with them about the real cost for what they say they want to do. Most leaders introduce change during a period that we refer to as uninformed optimism, which means they don't actually have a clue what they just started.
Oh, that's funny.
And the problem with that is they can't properly prepare the organization for what it's going to really take.
Right.
So one of the things we do is to make sure they have a very sober understanding of what's the reality of this change you want. You know, one option is if you're not really ready to do all of that, let's pull back and do what you are ready to do, or let's ramp up and get ready for what you really, either way. Once that's established, then what we do is we bring to bear these 40 years of the patterns. So we guide them in how do you replicate the success patterns and how do you avoid the failure patterns. How do you create commitment, minimize resistance? How do you not overload the organization? How do you bring the culture in line to support what you're doing? Those are the areas we work in.
So if I'm just speaking to a senior executive, some of the things I'm going to say is, look, you've got to bring your team around you and engage them actively in helping you. Whether or not you really think you need their help is not even the point. The point is you've got to have them as part of that process. Bring them to the table, engage them in helping you create a clear understanding around why this must happen. Whatever this transformation is, why it must happen, why it must succeed. Engage them in creating a clear picture of what the future is. So how will we know we got there? What are the key measures that will tell us that we've succeeded? What is that? How do the parts fit together out on the other side, whether that's 3 years from now or wherever that happens to be? And then finally, engaging them in helping to establish a way or ways by which you'll know you're on track, that you and your team will know every day that you're working in concert with and in harmony with what you said you were going to accomplish. And that can be through things like establishing a simple set of guiding principles that not only everyone on that team applies, but everyone on their teams apply every single day in every meeting, in every decision that's involved with moving this thing forward. Now, beyond that, I would talk about preparation. And I would first sit down with that most senior executive and say, let's talk about whether or not you're prepared to lead this. And that's a tough conversation sometimes, because you're talking to someone who likely has a long, illustrious career. They've been extremely successful. But that success may not be built on actually changing a business or transforming business. It may be about being masterful at running the business. So we talk about the way they think about changing, the way they think about leading, the way they think about conflict, the way they think about resistance. And we do work with them to help them understand how they can add to an already rich toolkit so that they're prepared to lead.
What makes Connor Partners' approach different from other change management companies?
You know, I'm a little biased, so I could take a long time to talk about that. Let me just mention a couple of things that I think are important. One is there's not many people in this work that can claim they've been at it for 40 years. There's a real advantage, and I don't mean that we've been involved in change work for 40 years. This is all we've done for 40 years. So we're not spread out among a lot of different services. That allows a level of depth to what we perceive and what we're able to convey that's hard to match for a lot of organizations. Secondly, we're really calibrated toward this realization. All of our work, we would not be a good resource if an organization is simply trying to install something. We're a resource if they want to go to full realization. It's a transformation. It's a business imperative. So we're on in that space, and that's unique. A lot of other firms would sort of help with any change. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of methodology. We have tools and techniques that we've developed over the years, but every organization, every firm that's doing this kind of work would have that. I'm very proud of the methodology that we've developed. Actually, that's not really the most important thing we bring to the table. To me, good tools and techniques is just table stakes. I think the real difference in our work is how we show up, is the character and presence that we bring to the relationship. To me, character and presence is what's the difference between a change technician and a change master consultant. Mm-hmm. A technician is going to be looking for hitting deadlines and deliverables. A master practitioner is bringing insight and wisdom. And for us, the difference is not the tools and techniques, and we've got good ones. It's the relationship we have. It's the character and presence that we bring into the situation. So to me, that's the most important difference in our work.
Wow. Now, as one of the early pioneers in the field and as an advisor to many organizations that have grappled with change, what counsel can you offer to leaders who are considering taking on a strategic execution?
Well, one thing to be careful about is to remember that paradigms are not broken by consensus. So leaders need to be very strong in the presence they bring forward. I don't mean shut up and do what I tell you to. That's not going to work today. But as you accept a lot of input into helping you make the decision about what's going to change, just be aware that creating a consensus for a paradigm leap is unlikely to occur quickly. And most of the organizations coming to us need change to happen pretty quickly. So just understand that large fundamental change is not done in a very democratic way. It's done with a few leaders at the top getting input and then saying, watch my lips, we're doing this. Now that's not going to be well received by a lot of people who want everybody to be happy, but that actually leads to the second issue. The job of a leader today with dramatic change isn't to make everybody happy. Their job is to help people to succeed despite their discomfort. The only way you can make everybody happy with change is to make it incremental. So if it's major fundamental change, I assure you people are going to have some disruption that they have to go through. So leaders have to understand they can't measure success based on happy scales. They do need to make sure that people are succeeding, not necessarily that they're always happy. Another issue is there's a tremendous amount of messiness during major change. There's all kind of ambiguities, there's mixed signals. You have to make really important decisions with insufficient information. You've got to learn from failure. Not all executives are prepared for that. Many of them, their careers have been much more linear, much more predictable. With large strategic change, you have to let go of one trapeze before you grab the next one. You're literally inventing in the air. Not every leader is prepared for that. Another issue is it's vitally important to stay on top of the priorities. There's a tendency to ask too many people to do too many things around change, and they diffuse their ability to get things done. So you've got to set some priorities. Let me say it this way. The single biggest pathology I run into at the leadership level is the inability to say no.
Oh.
There's so many yeses they want to say, they overload the system. You have to be very disciplined. It's actually as important what you say no to as what you're saying yes to, because you can't say deep yeses if you haven't said some deep no's.
Right.
Otherwise you diffuse the effort.
Right. So in order to get everybody on board, you can't be saying yes. You can't be trying to pacify and make people happy with those yeses.
Not only not make them happy, your own desire to, as a leader, there's so many things you want to do. My advice is narrow down to where it's painful that you're having to say no to some things. That's telling you you're probably as focused as you need to be for transformational change. The last one I would suggest leaders pay attention to is you have to be introspective about this. You cannot transform an organization unless you're willing to transform yourself. Leaders who think, here's a common situation, a leader will come to me wanting advice, and they're looking over the rail saying, what do we do to them? I'm going, whoa, if this doesn't affect you, if you're not having to make some adjustments, we're probably not dealing with transformational change.
That's funny. That's great.
One of the biggest mistakes I see executives make is attempting to delegate the transformation to a team. I was recently working with a team that had been appointed with the transformation. There's always a lot of energy and enthusiasm and interest up front when they embark on the transition. There's a lot of communication, a team is appointed, they're chartered, and then the executive tends to step away and say, well, let me know what you need from me. This team had been moving along, making a lot of progress, doing what teams do, and then it stalled. It stalled when the change hit the business, and it started to introduce some disruption. And at that point, the team realized they needed their executive, who happened to be the CEO, to step in and be owning this, to be driving it. They needed him to be communicating expectations across his leadership team so that they could go out and do their work. And I really believed that the CEO wanted to effectively lead this, but he didn't know how. And so I worked with the leaders of the transformation team, and we put together a plan to help engage and enroll and really get the executive who was leading this to step up and help the team be successful in what they needed to do. You can't continue to run your business with the same structures, the same processes, the same people, the same behaviors, and expect a transformation to happen. You have to be able to embed the transformation in the business. The leaders who are running the business have to be the ones who are leading the transformation. They have to be the ones pushing those changes into their organization, changing behaviors, changing mindsets. And they have to be the ones who are making choices, prioritizing to stop some things and start others to free up space for that transformation. This is going to take more time than you think it's going to take, and it's going to take more time than you think you have. But you can't run a transformation in your spare time.
So in closing, Daryl, if there was just one thing that you could pass on to executives who are responsible for transformational initiatives, what would it be?
My single message would be that transformational change can never be made easy. It can be made doable. If you will pay attention to and apply these patterns of success and avoid the patterns of failure and add some courage and discipline, you can actually achieve what you're after.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Daryl, for coming on the show today and for sharing with us these effective solutions that you use at Connor Partners.
Thank you, Jackie.
For 21st Century Business, I'm Jackie Bales. Thanks for watching.
This and other 21st Century Business topics are always easily accessible right from your computer. Visit us at 21cbtv.com.